Microsoft, and I'll be talking today about our digital trends. But just to set some context for this, I manage our global consumer insights for Microsoft Advertising. And we actually sit in a very unique place in Microsoft because we sit within the engineering BG. And the reason we do this is to stay very close to the product teams. Our objective is to basically run thought leadership and launch these broad, global, brand agnostic, platform agnostic studies, one of which I'll speak to today, our digital trend studies. And the reason we do this is twofold. One is to improve our own products and services for our customers, and two, the area that I'm more directly involved in, which I think will be more relevant to the folks in this room, is to activate those learnings from a branding and marketing perspective with our key agencies and accounts. So what's really fun as we go through this is it's really thought-provoking, it's really interesting. This type of a setup really lends itself to more of a conversation, so I'll definitely try to keep some time at the end to open up to questions. And as you mentioned, I'll be here throughout much of the rest of the day. My colleague Jason will be speaking later. I definitely encourage you to stay for that. That will be incredible. And we can have more of a discussion about these. But just to set this up, this is our digital trend study, but we really like to say that these are consumer trends looked at through a digital lens. And what was really unique about this study, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds on the methodology, but it was a very comprehensive, very holistic look at where are we right now in terms of technology and usage, but where are we going? And we like to say that we are interested in the whys behind the consumer what's. Because as we all know in this room, technology changes infinitely quickly. So if you really understand what's driving consumers to do certain things, you're going to be much better placed when that technology changes. So in terms of what we did for methodology is we actually started with pretty robust qualitative work where we talked to 45 early adopters across these 8 countries. These are really folks on the bleeding edge. The early adopters. We also talked to industry leaders and kind of thought leaders in the space, and I'll highlight a few of them as we go through this talk. We did week-long online diaries where we really just monitored how they were using technology, what workarounds were they doing, what were their areas of frustration, what were they excited about, and then we followed it up with multiple hours of Skype interviews with these early adopters. And then what we did is we went into workshop mode in partnership with IPG Media Brands and the Future Laboratory, which is a future-proofing kind of strategic consulting firm based in the UK. And coming out of that workshop, we then had hypotheses to test and confirm, and that's when we went into our 8,000-person online study to really try to get some richness and some quantitative numbers behind what we are going to go through today. So I'm going to play the first video, which I may need to step down here quickly for to make sure it plays out. So great. You get a wine later for that.
We put consumers first. So we asked over 8,000 people some big questions. How is your relationship with technology changing? What do you want now? What will you want tomorrow? We learned that as consumers, our infatuation with technology has passed, but the love is still there. And moving forward, we have a clear idea of exactly what we want. We want to feel appreciated. We know what our data is worth and we're willing to share it. But we want to feel valued in return. We also want real privacy, as we call back control of our digital lives. We want technology that gives us the right to delete. We want the ability to track our bad habits and develop new good ones. We want technology that supports our self-improvement. And we want to refashion technology for our needs, using new coding and hacking skills. Instead of waiting for new products and platforms, we want to build them ourselves. We want an alternative to mega systems that can't give us networks with personal depth and quality. We want more powerful connections to things we love. And we want less digital clutter, as the boundaries blur between physical and virtual. We want always on to become on when required. We want to explore new realms of reality instead of mirroring what we already know. We want technology that ignites all our senses. And we want to enjoy coincidences that enrich our lives. We want technology to surprise and delight us. These 8 trends help us to understand the future better. By making our relationship with technology more entertaining, useful and meaningful, we don't just help brands and consumers have more time together, we improve their time together. We help them have the time of their lives.
Stage, and I'm going to go through those 8 in a little bit more detail. The overall theme that we really saw coming through in these trends is a maturation of the relationship consumers have with technology. In the past, 10 to 15 years, it's been about the newest, the fastest, the biggest, the brightest, the best, sometimes the smallest, but you understand the point. And now consumers are becoming a little bit more demanding and a little bit more mature and informed about technology, and that really influences their expectations that they're going to have with brands and companies that communicate to and with them on those technologies. So let's take a few minutes, and I do need to caveat this by saying that each of these 8 trends I could probably do an entire day/workshop on, so I'm really giving you the high level here, but the good news is I'm happy to share afterwards, I'm happy to have follow-up conversations, and something that I'm really excited about is actually Microsoft is doing a digital trends refresh later in this year, which I'll be spearheading, and we'll really look at how these trends are going to continue to evolve. And just to kind of set some parameters around this, these trends are really meant to be a year to 18 months in sort of the future. There are some which clearly we think are already here, and some which are much more niche right now, but just to kind of set where we're going with this. So the first trend we call Value Me, and this is really about consumers understanding now, for maybe the first time, that their personal data has an inherent monetary value. They understand that there is this whole world and this whole economy being traded on with their personal data, and they're increasingly going to want a slice of that pie. It's sort of data as the new currency. And we're going to take a very specific look in terms of what this means. What are the trade-offs? If consumers are going to provide you as a marketer, brand, or something, what can you give them that is going to be valuable in return to preserve that relationship? So that's really the first one. I think everyone's heard the saying now, if you're getting something for free, you are the product. And this is absolutely something that's now, for the first time, really on consumers' mindsets. And so it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of examples out there of now consumers being able to trade in more of an ad network or even a one-on-one relationship, personal data, for some sort of value, be it coupons or better service. And we definitely think this is an area that's going to become much more important as more folks are connected and there's a broader awareness of this trend. And I like to contrast this with our second one, which is right to anonymity. I think that through many things that have happened, both in the political, government, all the way down to company level, there's a much higher awareness now that we are leaving our digital footprint and fingerprint everywhere we go. And ironically now, consumers are really starting to want the same kind of anonymity that they get in the offline world in the online world. So if you're talking to your friends, just in your real world, and you walk away, that conversation's gone. But that doesn't happen online, and consumers are now becoming much more acutely aware of this. And from a branding and marketing perspective, we think this is really interesting when you start to think about what does that mean for privacy policies? What does that mean for how you communicate, how you use data, what sorts of communications you have with your consumers, because this is absolutely something that through a confluence of sources is now becoming much more on the radar of consumers. As we move along here, My Analytics is the next trend I'm going to talk about, and this is really about the quantified self movement. This is about wearables. This is about new technology that allows you to really, for the first time, be able to measure, analyze, and then use personal data to improve your life. And we see this certainly in the exercise, health, and wellness area, also in the finance area. And so we think it's really interesting what other areas are going to open up that before was maybe too onerous or too difficult to track, that now you'll be able to develop new good life habits or share progress with your friends. And really what's the role of the quantified self in terms of branding and marketing, and how can brands help enable that? The next two I actually talk about together sometimes, and to give props one more time to my colleague Jason, he's going to go into much more detail about how we at Microsoft are approaching Intelligently On and Age's Serendipity. But Intelligently On, you may have seen in the video, we're sort of talking about an evolution from a world where you're always on to now on when required, or intelligently on. We as consumers are increasingly wanting technology that disappears but does not disconnect, and is intelligent enough to know when to break through that digital clutter to you. And we think for brands this has huge repercussions. We think it's really important to try to make every communication with consumers as relevant and as necessary as possible, so that silence, in a way, can become more powerful than just the digital chaos that is out there in the world. And Age of Serendipity, one, time allowing, I'll do a little bit more of a deep dive on, but this one I think is really fun because it's about introducing that moment that feels like a happy accident. It's this idea that consumers are wanting their technology to facilitate things that just feel like serendipity. And we've got some examples coming up of that one. That one's a little bit more vague. It sort of helps to ground it in a few examples, and I'm always looking for examples you might have of those moments when technology just surprises and delights us. And if you can be the brand or a marketer that facilitates that, we actually see quantitatively that there's much, much, much higher purchase intent and brand loyalty if you can deliver surprisingly pleasant experiences to your consumers. Creator culture, one of my favorites to talk about. It's sort of the most future-looking one. And this is really about coding as a second language. This is the youngest generation, those post-millennials, Gen I, plurals, really wanting to be able to disassemble and reassemble the digital products and services in their lives. And the explosion of after-school coding clubs, and the idea that kids now as young as 5 and 6 are learning these life skills, and what does that mean to you as branders, as marketers, as consultants? How can you help your clients to make them think about being on the leading edge of this trend? Because it's something that as those kids grow up, that's just a skill that they're going to have, and they're going to look to brands to be able to further personalize. The next one is niche networks. This one's clearly one that's sort of already here in many ways. It's about consumers looking for slightly more personalized experience around their social media. We always say this does not mean a rejection of the mega brands. The mega brands definitely have their place, but it's also, going back to value me, we see that consumers are more willing to share if it's a personal, a trusted network, if it's something that's built around an inherent interest that they have. So there's a lot we're doing, for instance, on our Skype platform that really speaks to this, like-minded niche networks, common interest sort of phenomena. And to round out the 8th one here, this is enhancing the real. This is the first one I'll quickly deep dive into. And this is really about the blurring between the online and the offline worlds and what that means in many, many verticals. So I am going to hopefully dive into enhancing the real, Age of Serendipity, and creator culture. You could give me a quick time check if I should speed it up, but I think it always helps to kind of bring up some examples, and I encourage you all to think about questions and examples as we go through this. So enhancing the real, as I mentioned, this is about the confluence of the online and offline world. Augmented reality, virtual reality. In fact, as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the industry leaders we spoke to was actually the guy who coined the term virtual reality, Jaron Lanier. Very interesting guy. I encourage you to look him up if possible. He was just on the Colbert Report. Definitely dynamic and interesting, and he's been involved in this digital trends project from the onset. And this is really about the idea that going online in the future is going to seem very antiquated because we're going to have the Internet of Things. The Internet's going to be built into everything around us. And what does this mean now for branders and marketers? So in terms of where we are today, we see that over 35% are already saying digital devices and services are enhancing their experience in the real world. One kind of set of clients that we talk to this quite a lot about is our retail clients. Retail is very keen to figure out, how do you curb showrooming, or how do you actually make it work for you? What are ways that you can pull in your smartphone, your devices at point of sale to really layer on more value add for your customer? And so as we go through this, I won't have enough time today, but I've basically pulled out some examples of things that are happening out there now that sort of illustrate this. So a lot of augmented reality apps. There's a lot we're doing with Connect. There's being able to virtually try on clothes, speaks to the retail issue I was talking about. There's also this idea that we want our experiences to be more sensory. So go beyond the visual. How can you introduce more haptics, more touch technology, more smells even? Pepsi's trying to patent a lot of fragrances now in their beverages, which we think is kind of interesting and speaks to this whole idea of digital does not have to be devoid of senses anymore. In fact, it can help enhance your senses. And actually, I think what we'll do now is try to play the next video. An example of something we're doing with our Connect technology in Germany.
Since the invention of shoes, you try them on where they're sold. And in the digital age, it stays the same. We call it virtual shoe fitting. The technology that turns regular audio media into virtual shoe stores. For the first time, we synchronized 3 Microsoft Connect devices to scan your feet. We then used this data to render 3D shoes on top of it in real time. To launch our technology, we went to the most frequented places, central stations. You start by selecting any model and size. To see the shoe like you're actually wearing it. Finally, we made shoe fitting social. So if you're not sure about a shoe, you can share a snapshot with your friends via Facebook. Once you've made a decision, QR codes with your model and size info link you to the mobile checkout to get it delivered the next day. In the end, we created a new way to use outdoor media, and the fact that you can try on any shoe from the online store makes this the world's largest shoe store.
So that sort of speaks to some of the things we've been doing in retail, and as you can imagine, a lot of interest there. I close each little section with just some light reminders for branders and marketers, but really this is meant to be the first step in a conversation. So we talked about having all the human senses in mind, showing where possible, not telling, and that's going to be increasingly important to the younger generations. They're just visual storytellers, and they want more visuals, they want more rich media. So how can you show this, and how can you use a lot of technology to enhance human senses? And again, don't overwhelm. That's another theme that comes through is necessary interactions, breaking through the clutter in a meaningful and interesting way. So I'm going to move along to the next one, which is the age of serendipity. I'm going to move through this one fairly quickly, but I did want to highlight the last sentence of this quote here, which is, wanting technology to anticipate my world and my life and what I'm about to do, even to anticipate things that I don't know that I might want yet. And that's really part of serendipity too, is how can you deliver that surprising experience that feels like it anticipates what your desires might be and feels like it might know you even better than you know yourself. And why is this important? Well, already we're seeing a majority of folks saying that they expect technology to deliver surprising experiences that feel uniquely tailored and feel like coincidences. And we think at its most powerful, what digital technology can do is almost perform a type of magic. It can have a human feeling and a human connection so that these things that happen in your real world can feel like fate, can feel like a happy accident. We think there's been a lot of mysteries scrubbed out of the world with digital technologies, and so how can we put a little bit of that back into consumers' everyday lives? Some Some examples of this, we'll definitely speak more to Cortana later. I like talking about this interflora example because usually about half the audience thinks it's really cool and half thinks it's creepy. But what they did was they actually monitored tweets to look for any signs of people feeling bummed out or down or sad, and then automatically generated a bouquet of flowers to be sent to them for free. Sort of a way to cheer up some of their fans on Twitter. So a little bit of a PR sort of publicity stunt, but an interesting way to use social and to use these sort of happy surprises and big data to come together in more of a PR sense they mentioned. I think, I give a lot of credit to Spotify and to Netflix for sort of starting this trend of if you watch this or if you listen to this, you might like this. So another way to think of serendipity is kind of the next evolution of that personalized, recommendation engine. And where can we go beyond just recommending similar types of content? What else can we do to add value, to add surprise to our consumer base? There's one I just found out about called Surprisingly, and I know we had someone here from YouTube earlier, and this actually blocks out any sort of metadata around a YouTube video, so you don't know what the title is, you don't know how many likes it has, you don't know how much it's been shared, and you just see the video. So it's like a little, opening a present each time. You don't know what's actually there. So it'd be interesting to monitor things like this and see how they play out, see what the appetite is for them. And why do we say this is important? Well, as I mentioned, we have now 61% of people saying, if you deliver a pleasantly surprising experience, we're more likely to buy from you. So there's a direct transaction payoff. And we do think this is something consumers don't necessarily know to ask for, but there's an appetite for. So if you can get ahead of this and begin to do exciting experimental things in this area, there might be quite a payoff with your consumer base. We have one more example, but I think time-wise, this is actually a very kind of low-hanging fruit one that I like to show, because I like to make the point that serendipity does not need to be this massive thing. It can be smaller.
Presents a new ad concept for All Saints clothing that's every bit as cool as the apparel. Within the app, this inventive ad attracts attention by mirroring the point of view of the person scrolling through the page. A simple touch brings the consumer into a full-screen video sequence where their finger lets them scroll through a lavish banquet showcasing All Saints clothing. Strategic All Saints logos are hotspots that invite users to delve deeper into the brand story, as well as the party guests, providing additional content and a path to purchase.
Using the Microsoft platform, we allow us to create a more interesting and immersive experience.
Strategic placement, magnetic content. Microsoft and B&B create a totally holistic, image-based shopping experience for All Saints.
So really, when you think about something that seems as sort of staid as display ads seem now, how can we sort of begin to rethink that? How can we surprise the user just with a little bit of a difference, that perspective shift? And it's interesting to be in usability sessions with things like this, because you actually see the consumer, the body language changes, a little surprised, just that it's mirroring their perspective and that it's moving around in a more natural way. And I know there's been a lot made of the Amazon phone having 6 cameras and really being able to have some of this functionality built in for that little bit of surprise and delight and something a little unexpected from the consumer's point of view. So I think we've talked a little bit already about what this means for brands, but always think about delivering those surprising and memorable experiences. Think about how serendipity can be built into loyalty programs. Loyalty programs, we think, is a very underutilized area, very tactical area that can get a lot more usage if you build serendipity into it. It can be small and simple, as I mentioned, and try to go beyond past behavior. Look at other metrics, other data streams when you're considering what might be built into an algorithm or how to use other companies' algorithms to really target your customers. And of course, build quality control in the process, because there's nothing worse than delivering a surprisingly unpleasant experience. Certainly want to avoid that at any cost. And if I have time, I'll just touch on our very last one, because this is our sort of most far in the future, most fun for me to think about. This is all about creator culture. And this quote here is, "Coding for me is a bit like drawing or sketching, or perhaps even more like Legos for grown-ups. It's something I like to play around with, build things, and create things that have a life of their own." And so why is this interesting? Well, there's a lot going on out there in the world now where this new generation has grown up with new heroes, right? Heroes that build their own things, heroes that become billionaires in their 20s or sell their companies for $19 billion. So we have this whole generation now growing up with this entrepreneurial, build it, do it yourself kind of mentality. And even though this is still niche, there's actually only global awareness now of this that's just under a quarter of folks. What I think is really interesting is that this is something huge in emerging markets. So when we look at Brazil, when we look at India, when we look at China, this is something that's really on the forefront of those countries, which are also very young countries demographically. So we definitely see this in the next 5-10 years being an explosive change in the industry. And already, almost half of those in emerging markets that we talk to are expressing a desire to learn more about how to make or adapt digital products or services for their own needs. So a couple of examples here, Scratch Junior, Coder Dojo, those are probably some of the best known sort of after-school coding clubs, but they are actually actively recruiting the age brackets of 5 to 7-year-olds. So if you think about that, that's an incredibly early age to begin learning how to code. And we talked about the expectations, we talked about coding as just generally being less geeky, more accessible. A lot of barriers to entry for coding have really come down. And so what does this mean? Again, we have over half of people that are interested in making their own digital products in the future. And what does this mean then for intellectual property, for instance? And when you look at the coming together of this trend with something like 3D printing, as branders and marketers, how open can you be with your platforms? How can you be given credit for being on the leading edge of this trend? And how can you connect with this younger generation at this young of an age so that they remain loyal customers as they age? And one more statistic here to cite is that half of them are now expecting brands to be open and allow them to create products and services. And this actually already jumps to 65% in emerging markets. So again, that story of that bifurcation between kind of the developed world that's maybe a little more used to tougher IP regimes and things of the status quo versus this whole group of young kids and young adults in emerging markets that are really going to want to experiment and take down things and life hack and such of that going forward. No more videos here, but just a couple things I want to point out. Because this is such a demographically young trend, one of the first areas we're seeing this manifest itself in is actually in the gaming industry. So Microsoft has done two things. We've done ID at Xbox, where we opened up for amateur developers, and now we're doing something called Project Spark, which is actually open up to anyone to help develop and code their own video games. So it's really a coding community where they can make their own games, they can share with friends, and really build something together. So that's the way we're facilitating this. There's also numerous other examples of this kind of starting in the very nascent phase. But as I mentioned, I just think it's one to really keep your eye on because of that importance of getting involved with the youngest generations, engaging in emerging markets. How can you align with the coder clubs and after school clubs? We now have the first schools that are now building in coding into their curriculum. So this is absolutely something that's going to quickly ramp up as these kids are getting out of school as well. And how can you embrace disruption? And how can you not always see something like this as necessarily a threat to your business model, but really work with it to try to encourage more loyal fan base? And as I mentioned, that was a very cursory view. There's still 5 more trends we didn't even get to cover, but I'm happy to provide full trends information. And as I mentioned, we're going into a trends refresh later on this year to see how these trends have evolved, how else are they manifesting themselves, have any bifurcated, have any come together, and always interested to hear more examples and how clients and such are using these. So that's all for today. Thank you.